They came to Earth looking for slaves. They left running from something far worse. Because humans don't break the way the galaxy expects. We adapt. We endure. And when pushed far enough, we hunt. They came with chains made of light. Humanity had watched the stars for centuries, listening for whispers, hoping for neighbors, fearing conquerors. When the sky finally answered, it did not whisper. It split open. Ships descended like falling suns, their hulls smooth and seamless, glowing with cold intelligence. Cities went silent. Satellites went dark. Every weapon humanity had ever built was rendered meaningless in the span of a breath. The beings who stepped onto Earth did not shout. They did not threaten. They simply announced, "You are now property." They called themselves the Vareen. They were tall, elegant creatures, their forms shifting slightly as if reality bent around them. Their voices were calm, almost gentle, like teachers addressing a classroom of children. They explained everything with patience. Humanity was not unique. Humanity was not special. Humanity was not even particularly valuable. But humanity was useful, strong, adaptive, resilient, perfect for labor. They demonstrated their superiority without cruelty, but with absolute certainty. A city's entire power grid shut down with a gesture. A military base dissolved into dust when it dared to resist. Entire oceans stilled under invisible pressure. The message was clear. Resistance was not bravery. It was extinction. So humanity bowed. At first, they gathered billions into controlled zones. Not cages. Not prisons. Something worse. Systems. Each human was tagged, monitored, categorized. Their bodies were studied. Their limits mapped. Their endurance measured. The Vareen did not torture for pleasure. They optimized. Work cycles were calculated to extract maximum output without immediate death. Nutrition was adjusted to sustain effort, not comfort. Rest was permitted only when it increased efficiency. People became numbers. Numbers became data. Data became improvement. And the Vareen improved quickly. Factories rose across continents, built by human hands under alien direction. Mines opened in deserts and mountains. Entire forests vanished to feed machines that humans did not understand. Years passed. Humanity did not break. That was the first mistake. The Vareen had enslaved dozens of species across the galaxy. Some resisted and were erased. Some surrendered and decayed into obedience. Most lost themselves within a generation. Humans did not. They adapted. They learned the rhythm of their captors. They learned the gaps in observation. They learned how to speak without speaking. A glance became a message. A hesitation became a warning. A shared burden became a bond. The Vareen noticed increased efficiency. They recorded it as a success. They did not understand what they were creating. In one of the largest industrial zones, beneath the ruins of what had once been a coastal city, a man collapsed. His name had once been Daniel Reyes, though the system identified him as Unit 47C Delta 9921. He fell during a heavy lift cycle. His muscles had reached failure. His body had nothing left to give. A Vareen overseer approached. It did not feel anger. It did not feel frustration. It simply assessed unit efficiency below acceptable threshold. Daniel tried to rise. His arms trembled. His vision blurred. Continue function, the Vareen instructed. He could not. The overseer raised one slender limb. Light gathered at its tip, forming a thin, precise line of energy. It was not a weapon of rage. It was a tool. Obsolete units were removed. Daniel closed his eyes. The light never reached him. A metal beam slammed into the Vareen's side with a force no human should have been capable of. The overseer staggered, its form flickering. Another human stood there, breathing hard, eyes burning. Her name had once been Amina Hassan. She did not hesitate. She attacked again. The beam crushed into the Vareen's core, disrupting its form. For the first time, the alien entity reacted with something resembling confusion. Deviation detected, it said. Amina did not stop. Other workers froze. Fear spread like wildfire. This was death. This was extinction. But something else spread too. The Vareen raised its limb again, targeting Amina. It never fired. A dozen humans moved at once. Not organized. Not planned. Instinct. They swarmed. They used tools, debris, their own bodies. They attacked with desperation, with fury, with something the Vareen had never properly accounted for. Sacrifice. The overseer collapsed, its form unraveling into fading light. Silence followed. Then alarms. For the first time since their arrival, the Vareen had lost control of a unit to human aggression. They adapted immediately. Security increased. Monitoring intensified. Punishments became faster, more precise. Entire groups were eliminated when deviations were detected. But something had already changed. The humans had seen it. The Vareen could be hurt. That was the second mistake. Rebellion did not explode. It spread. Slowly. Quietly. A dropped tool here. A delayed response there. A broken component that took just a little longer to repair. Tiny inefficiencies. The Vareen corrected them as they appeared. But the pattern was subtle. Distributed. Intentional. Humans began to test limits. A whispered word during a shift. A hidden gesture. A shared memory of what Earth had been. Identity returned. The Vareen responded with logic. If humans resisted under current conditions, then conditions must change. They introduced control implants. Small devices placed at the base of the skull. They monitored neural activity, suppressed aggression, induced compliance. Efficiency improved. Rebellion decreased. The Vareen recorded success. That was the third mistake. Humans did not stop adapting. They learned the implants. They learned their patterns, their delays, their blind spots. Pain became a tool. Emotion became a weapon. Some humans discovered that extreme focus could slip past the implant's suppression. Others found that shared synchronization, multiple minds aligning at once, could overwhelm the system. They began to train. Not openly, never openly, but in moments. A lifted weight held just a second longer. A breath controlled under strain. A thought repeated until it became stronger than the signal trying to silence it. They were no longer just surviving. They were preparing. The Vareen noticed anomalies. Humans were exceeding predicted limits. Endurance was increasing beyond baseline projections. Reaction times were improving under stress. The data was fascinating. They began to study it more closely. They isolated groups. They pushed them harder. They measured the results. Humans grew stronger, faster, more dangerous. The Vareen did not see a threat. They saw potential. That was the fourth mistake. In a facility buried deep beneath what had once been a mountain range, the Vareen initiated a new program. They called it adaptive labor optimization. Humans selected for high resilience were subjected to intensified conditions. Higher gravity, lower oxygen, extended work cycles. The goal was simple: create better workers. The result was something else entirely. The first group lost half its numbers within weeks. The survivors did not break. They changed. Their bodies hardened. Their reflexes sharpened. Their pain tolerance became something unnatural. More importantly, their minds evolved. They learned to operate under constant stress. They learned to think clearly when their bodies screamed to stop. They learned to ignore fear. The Vareen recorded unprecedented gains. They expanded the program. More humans were brought in. More variables were introduced. Combat simulations were added to test coordination under pressure. The simulations became more complex, more realistic, more violent. Humans were forced to fight each other, to compete, to survive. The Vareen watched, fascinated by the data. They did not understand what they were building. Amina Hassan was still alive. She had been moved to the program after her act of defiance. Her aggression had been noted as a valuable trait. They had refined her, strengthened her, sharpened her. She no longer looked like the woman who had lifted that metal beam. Her movements were precise, controlled, efficient. Her eyes were different. She had learned everything the Vareen had tried to teach. And then she had learned more. The simulations were supposed to break individuals. Instead, they created leaders. Amina began to communicate without words. Signals hidden in movement. Patterns embedded in action. Others followed. They formed units. Not assigned. Chosen. Trust became the greatest weapon. The Vareen increased difficulty. Introduced unpredictable variables. Simulated external threats. The humans adapted faster than expected. They began to win. Not just survive. Win. The Vareen adjusted their models. They had not created better workers. They had created hunters. That realization came too late. The first coordinated uprising within the facility lasted exactly 7 minutes. It began with a failure. A door that did not open on schedule. A light that flickered out of sequence. Small things. Intentional things. Then the humans moved. Not as individuals. As a unit. They disabled surveillance nodes with precise strikes. They used the environment as a weapon. They targeted weaknesses they had learned through months of observation. The Vareen deployed countermeasures. Too slow. The humans anticipated them. Amina led the charge. She moved through the facility with lethal efficiency, her team at her side. Every action was calculated. Every movement had purpose. They reached the control core, the heart of the system. The Vareen attempted to intervene directly. For the first time, they faced humans who were not afraid. The battle was short. It was brutal. It was decisive. The control core fell. The facility went dark. Across the planet, systems flickered. Monitoring dropped. Communication fractured. For a moment, the Vareen lost control. That moment was enough. The signal spread. Not through technology. Through people. The story of what had happened. The knowledge that the Vareen could be fought. That they could be defeated. It moved faster than any network. Humans rose. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But enough. Factories burned. Mines collapsed. Supply lines were disrupted. The Vareen responded with overwhelming force. Entire regions were erased. But the pattern had changed. Humans were no longer reacting. They were hunting. Small groups formed across the planet. They operated in shadows, striking quickly, disappearing before retaliation could arrive. They targeted infrastructure, weak points, isolated units. They learned from every encounter. They adapted faster than the Vareen could compensate. The hunters spread. The Vareen escalated. They deployed more advanced units, increased surveillance, tightened control. But their system was built on predictability. On logic. Humans were no longer predictable. They used chaos as a weapon. A group would attack in one region, drawing forces away from another. A sabotage operation would trigger a chain reaction that disrupted multiple systems. Nothing was random. Everything was intentional. The Vareen began to lose efficiency. Their models failed. Their projections became unreliable. For the first time, they encountered something they had not prepared for. A species that learned faster than they could control. Years passed. The war did not end. It evolved. Humans reclaimed territory piece by piece. Not through direct confrontation, but through relentless pressure. The Vareen adapted, but always one step behind. They began to withdraw from certain areas, consolidating their forces. They began to consider something they had never considered before. Retreat. Amina stood on a ridge overlooking a shattered landscape. Once, it had been a city. Now it was a battlefield. Beside her stood others like her. Not slaves. Not workers. Hunters. Each one shaped by the same crucible. Each one carrying the same fire. They watched as a Vareen ship lifted into the sky, its engines glowing as it prepared to leave. "They're running," one of them said. Amina did not smile. "They're learning," she replied. She knew this was not over. The Vareen would not forget. They would not forgive. They would return. But they would return to a different species. Humanity had changed. They had been broken. They had been reshaped. They had been forged into something dangerous. Something relentless. Something that did not fear the stars anymore. Amina turned away from the sky. "Let them go," she said. For now. The hunters moved with her, disappearing into the ruins. Behind them, the earth breathed again. Not free. Not yet. But no longer owned. Far beyond the planet, within the vast networks of the Vareen, data flowed. Reports were compiled, failures analyzed, conclusions drawn. A single directive emerged. Humanity was no longer suitable for labor. Humanity was a threat. Humanity was to be avoided. It was the first time in their recorded history that the Vareen had classified a species not as a resource, but as a predator. And on a quiet world that had once been conquered, the predators were just getting started. The Vareen did not run far enough. They told themselves it was a strategic withdrawal, a recalibration, a necessary pause to reassess an unexpected variable. They did not call it fear. But the data told a different story. Across their networks, simulations were run again and again. Every model that included humanity beyond a certain threshold collapsed into instability. Outcomes became unpredictable. Losses increased exponentially. The conclusion was simple. Humans could not be controlled. So the Vareen changed their approach. If a species could not be enslaved, it could be erased. The directive spread through their fleets like a silent storm. No occupation, no integration, no study beyond what was required. Total elimination. But the Vareen were not reckless. They did not rush back to Earth in blind retaliation. They prepared. They designed new units, optimized not for control, but for annihilation. Autonomous war constructs capable of adapting in real time. Weapons that did not rely on predictable patterns. Systems built to counter the chaos humans had become. They learned from their mistakes. Or so they believed. On Earth, the hunters felt the shift before they saw it. It began with silence. Too much silence. Vareen presence had been diminishing for months, their forces pulling back from contested zones. Supply lines had thinned. Surveillance had dropped. At first, it seemed like victory. Then the signals stopped entirely. No drones, no patrols, no response. It was wrong. Amina stood within what had once been an underground command center, now repurposed into something new. Not a headquarters, not a base, a network. Humans moved in and out, carrying information, resources, fragments of a world still rebuilding itself. There were no ranks here, no formal structure. Only function, only trust. The gone, one of the scouts said. Amina shook her head. No, she replied. They're waiting. The room fell quiet. Everyone there had learned the same lesson. The Vareen did nothing without purpose. Days passed, then weeks. The silence stretched, and then it broke. The first impact did not come from the sky. It came from below. In a region once known for its vast mining operations, the ground split open. Entire sections of land collapsed inward, swallowed by something massive moving beneath the surface. Witnesses described it as a shadow that devoured everything it touched. A construct, not like the Vareen overseers. This one was different. It did not observe. It did not command. It consumed. By the time hunters reached the site, there was nothing left but a crater and residual energy signatures unlike anything they had encountered before. Amina arrived hours later. She knelt at the edge of the destruction, her gaze fixed on the scorched earth. It's not a unit, she said quietly. One of the others frowned. Then what is it? She stood. It's a weapon. The attacks spread. Not in a pattern. Not in a way that could be predicted. Cities that had begun to rebuild vanished overnight. Entire regions went dark. The constructs came from everywhere and nowhere, striking without warning, leaving nothing behind. They adapted. Every encounter was different. Some moved like living storms, tearing through structures with unstoppable force. Others were silent, dismantling targets with surgical precision. A few seemed almost alive, reacting to resistance with terrifying intelligence. The hunters engaged them. At first, they died. Groups that had survived years of conflict were wiped out in minutes. Tactics that had worked against the Vareen failed completely. These were not overseers. These were exterminators. Amina called for retreat. It was not a popular decision. We can't just let them take everything, one of the hunters argued. We're not letting them, Amina replied. We're learning them. The difference mattered. They shifted strategy. No direct confrontation. Observation. Analysis. Survival. The hunters became ghosts again, fading into the edges of a world under siege. They tracked the constructs, studied their behavior, recorded every movement, every reaction. Patterns began to emerge, not obvious ones, but enough. The constructs were not independent. They were coordinated. Somewhere, something was guiding them. Amina focused on that. If we find the source, she said, we don't fight the weapons. We end the war. Finding it would not be easy. The Vareen had learned. Their control signals were fragmented, distributed across multiple layers, hidden within fluctuations that looked like background noise. But humans had learned too. What the Vareen saw as chaos, humans saw as language. Teams were sent out, each with a single purpose. Listen. Days turned into weeks. Then one signal changed. A faint pulse, buried beneath the noise. Consistent. Deliberate. Amina felt it before the data confirmed it. That's it, she said. The location was not on Earth. It was in orbit. A single structure, cloaked and shielded, positioned beyond the range of most detection systems. A command node. The mind behind the extermination. Reaching it would be nearly impossible. The Vareen had not left it unguarded. Automated defenses surrounded the node, layers of protection designed to eliminate anything that approached. A direct assault would fail. Amina did not plan a direct assault. She chose a team. Not the strongest, not the fastest, the ones who understood. They launched in a vessel built from fragments of Vareen technology, something humans had pieced together through years of scavenging and experimentation. It should not have worked. It did. They approached the node slowly, masking their presence within the same noise the Vareen used to hide their signal. The defenses did not react. At first, then one did. A single construct detached from the perimeter, moving toward them with precise intent. Amina watched it through the viewport. Now, she said, the ship shifted, not away, toward it. The maneuver was sudden, aggressive, unpredictable. For a fraction of a second, the construct hesitated. That was all they needed. They slipped past. Alarms triggered. The entire defense network came alive. Too late. The ship reached the node. Docking was not an option. They breached. The interior was unlike anything they had seen before. Not mechanical, not organic, something in between. The air itself seemed to hum with energy. This is it, one of the team whispered. Amina moved forward. They did not have time. The constructs outside were already adapting, recalculating, preparing to destroy the intruders. Inside, the node reacted. The space shifted, walls reconfiguring, pathways closing and opening in response to their presence. It was trying to isolate them, divide them. Amina pushed through. She did not fight the structure. She read it. Every movement, every change, every reaction. It was a system, and systems could be broken. They reached the core, a vast chamber filled with light, data flowing in streams too complex to fully comprehend. At its center was something new. A Vareen, not like the others. This one was stable, solid, defined. It turned as they entered. You have exceeded projected threat parameters, it said. Its voice was different, not calm, not detached, curious. Amina raised her weapon. You made us this way, she replied. The Vareen studied her. Correction, it said. You made yourselves. For a moment, neither moved. Then the constructs breached the outer layers. Time ran out. Amina did not hesitate. She attacked. The battle was unlike anything before. This Vareen did not fall easily. It adapted in real time, countering their movements, predicting their actions. It had learned from every encounter. So had they. The fight was fast, brutal, precise. One by one, Amina's team fell, each buying time, each creating an opening. Amina used them, not as sacrifices, as purpose. She reached the core interface. Not a console, not a machine, something deeper. She understood it without fully knowing how. The Vareen moved to stop her. Too late. She connected. Pain surged through her mind as data flooded in, overwhelming, incomprehensible. But she held on. She did not try to control it. She broke it. The signal collapsed. Across Earth, the constructs stopped. Not all at once, but enough. The coordination shattered. The extermination faltered. Inside the node, the Vareen staggered. You would destroy your own world to stop us, it said. Amina's vision blurred. No, she whispered. We'd destroy you. The core destabilized. Energy built, spiraling out of control. Amina turned. There was no escape. She knew that. She looked at what remained of her team. They understood. No words were needed. The light consumed everything. On Earth, the constructs fell silent. Some shut down completely. Others continued to move, but without purpose, without coordination. They were no longer a force. They were remnants. The hunters moved quickly. They dismantled what remained, piece by piece, ensuring nothing could be reactivated. The cost had been high. Too high. But the war had changed again. Far beyond the planet, the Vareen received the data. Another failure. Another loss. Another lesson. This time, the conclusion was not immediate. For the first time, the Vareen hesitated. Not because they did not know what to do, but because every option led to the same outcome. Humanity adapted. Humanity survived. Humanity hunted. On a world that refused to die, the hunters stood among the ruins of what had nearly been their end. Amina was gone, but what she had built remained. Not an army, not a resistance, something else. Something the Vareen had never faced before. A species that did not just fight back. A species that learned how to end wars. And somewhere in the vast silence between stars, the Vareen began to understand a truth they could no longer ignore. They had not just created hunters. They had created something far worse. An enemy that would not wait for the next attack. An enemy that would come for them. The hunters did not celebrate. There was no victory to claim. The sky was still broken. The world was still scarred. And the enemy was still out there. Amina's death did not end the war. It changed it. For the first time since the Vareen had arrived, humanity was no longer reacting. They were deciding. The silence that followed the collapse of the command node was different from before. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of thought. Across Earth, fragments of humanity connected. Not through systems the Vareen could track. Not through signals that could be intercepted. Through memory. Through shared understanding. Through purpose. The hunters gathered. Not in one place. Not under one banner. But they aligned. Every survivor carried a piece of what Amina had done. Not just the story. Not just the sacrifice. The method. She had not defeated the Vareen by overpowering them. She had broken them. And now humanity knew how. It began with a question. Not how do we defend? Not how do we survive? How do we end them? The answer was not simple. The Vareen were not a species that could be destroyed with a single strike. They were distributed, interconnected, layered across systems and networks that spanned light years. They did not have a single home. They were everywhere, and that had once made them unstoppable. Now it made them vulnerable. Because humanity had learned something the Vareen never truly understood. Complexity could be turned against itself. The hunters began to rebuild. Not cities. Not nations. Something else. Foundries hidden beneath mountains. Laboratories buried in the ruins of old worlds. Training grounds carved into places the Vareen had already written off as irrelevant. They worked with what they had. Scrap technology. Fragments of Vareen systems. Human ingenuity. They did not try to replicate alien designs. They improved them. The implants the Vareen had once used to control them became tools. Interfaces that allowed direct interaction with captured systems. Ways to think faster, to coordinate without speaking. They refined them, removed the limits, enhanced the connection. Humans became something new. Not machines. Not controlled. Integrated. The hunters evolved again. Years passed. The Vareen did not return. But they were not idle. Beyond the reach of Earth, they prepared. New fleets were assembled. New constructs designed. Strategies rewritten from the ground up. This time, there would be no mistakes. No underestimation. Humanity would not be enslaved. It would be erased completely. But the Vareen had already made their final mistake. They assumed humanity would wait. The first human ship left Earth in silence. It was not elegant. It was not perfect. It was enough. Built from scavenged Vareen technology and human design, it carried a single crew. Hunters. They did not launch with fanfare. There was no announcement, only a simple understanding. The war was no longer on Earth. It was everywhere. They did not know where they were going. Not exactly, but they knew how to find the Vareen. Follow the patterns. Follow the systems. Follow the logic. The very things that had once made the Vareen powerful. Now they were a trail. More ships followed. Not fleets. Not armadas. Small. Fast. Unpredictable. Each one carrying teams trained not just to fight, but to dismantle. To break systems from within. To turn strength into weakness. They did not call it an invasion. They called it the hunt. The first Vareen outpost fell without warning. It was located on a distant world, a processing hub for resources extracted from multiple systems. The Vareen did not expect an attack. They did not detect the ships until it was too late. The hunters did not engage directly. They infiltrated. Using modified implants, they interfaced with the outpost systems, introducing errors so small they went unnoticed at first. Power fluctuations, data inconsistencies, minor failures. The Vareen responded with standard protocols. Correction, stabilization, adjustment. They did not realize the corrections were the trap. Every fix made the system more unstable. Every adjustment pushed it closer to collapse. By the time they understood, it was too late. The outpost imploded, not from an external attack. From within, the hunters were already gone. The message spread across the Vareen network. Humanity had left Earth. The response was immediate. Containment protocols activated. Defensive networks expanded. Surveillance intensified across all known sectors. The Vareen adapted, but they were reacting again. And humans were already moving. Another outpost fell, then another. Each one different. Each one unexpected. Sometimes the hunters destroyed their targets. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they took control. Turned Vareen systems against each other. Forced them to fight themselves. Confusion spread. For a species built on logic, confusion was a weakness they had never needed to address. Until now, the Vareen began to change. Not just their tactics, themselves. They created new forms. Entities designed to think less like machines and more like the chaos they were facing. Hybrids. Adaptive intelligences capable of unpredictable behavior. It was a dangerous move. Necessary. For the first time, the Vareen were evolving under pressure. But evolution takes time. And humans did not give them time. A hunter team led by a woman named Lian reached deeper into Vareen space than any before them. They had tracked a signal. Not a command node. Something older. Something central. A convergence point where vast amounts of Vareen data flowed and merged. Not a home, but close. They approached carefully, masking their presence within the same chaotic patterns they had used before. But this time, the Vareen were ready. The moment they entered range, defenses activated. Not automated, not predictable. The hybrids moved. Fast, uncertain, dangerous. The hunters engaged. The battle was unlike anything they had faced. The hybrids did not follow patterns. They adapted mid-combat, changing tactics in ways that mirrored human behavior. For the first time, the hunters faced something that felt like them. It did not slow them down. It made them sharper. Lian pushed forward. Losses mounted. But the objective remained. Reach the convergence point. End it. They broke through. Barely. The structure at the center was vast, a shifting mass of data and energy, constantly reconfiguring itself. It was not a command center. It was something more. A core of thought. A place where the Vareen processed reality itself. Lian understood immediately. This was where they needed to strike. But not with weapons. With disruption. She connected. The implant flared to life, linking her mind to the structure. The data was overwhelming, infinite, but she did not try to understand it. She did what Amina had done. She broke it, not by force, by contradiction. She introduced human logic, chaos, emotion, uncertainty, concepts the Vareen could not fully process. The system reacted violently. Data streams clashed, processes failed, connections fractured. Across their entire network, the Vareen felt it. For the first time in their existence, their own system turned against itself. Ships lost coordination, constructs failed, hybrids hesitated. The hunters moved in that moment, striking everywhere at once, not planned, not coordinated by a central command. Instinct. The hunt had become something larger than any one group. Humanity itself was the weapon. The convergence point collapsed. Lian did not survive. She did not need to. The damage was done. The Vareen did not fall. Not completely, but they broke. Their network fractured into isolated fragments, each struggling to maintain coherence without the unified system that had defined them. For the first time, they were not a single force. They were many, and many could be hunted. Years passed, then decades. The war did not end in a single moment. It faded, piece by piece. The Vareen retreated further and further, abandoning systems they could no longer defend. Some tried to rebuild, some tried to adapt, some simply disappeared. Humanity did not stop. They followed, not out of revenge, not out of anger, out of necessity, because they understood something the Vareen had learned too late. If they stopped, the Vareen would return. And so the hunt continued. Across stars, across worlds, across time. On Earth, the scars remained. But so did the people. They rebuilt, not the same as before, not fragile, not unaware. They built a world that knew what was out there, a world that was ready. Children grew up hearing stories not of fear, but of what humanity had become. Not victims, not survivors, hunters. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of any single star, fragments of the Vareen still existed. Watching, learning, afraid, because they understood now. They had not just created hunters. They had created a species that did not stop. A species that adapted beyond control. A species that turned every weakness into strength. A species that had learned how to break something far greater than itself. And would do it again. The stars were no longer silent. They were a battlefield. And humanity was no longer waiting for what came from the dark. Humanity was the thing in the dark. The thing that moved without warning. The thing that ended wars before they began. The thing that turned empires into stories. The Vareen had come to Earth with chains made of light. They had left with something else entirely. A lesson written across the galaxy. Do not hunt humans, because they will hunt you back. And they will not stop. The galaxy learned a lesson it will never forget. Humans were never meant to be controlled. Never meant to be contained. And never meant to be hunted. Because once humanity enters the dark, it doesn't fear what's out there. It becomes it. And somewhere, in the silence between stars, something is still running.